member and our councilman, William Gregory, to all of our officials who are here today. It is indeed an honor to be here. I think I can tell a story that's very truthful. I was not supposed to be the speaker for it today, but call me a ram in the bush. There was a great speaker planned. He had his speech all laid out. He was ready to go. Unfortunately, some family matters were pressing, and he had to leave town to go north, matter of fact, to take care of some family. And so let me apologize in advance. He had a speech, but he didn't leave it with me. And you may have heard that there's always a runt of the litter, and that be me. So if you can suffer me for a few moments, I will try to channel the Reverend Joseph Darby and share a word for this occasion. 152 years ago, the Right Reverend Daniel Alexander Payne, a native of Charleston, Bishop in the African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Bishop in the African Methodist Episcopal Church met in the city of Baltimore. During that time, he commissioned missionaries to go to his home of Charleston to begin again the AME Church. It was in 1822 that Mother Emanuel was standing strong, and one of its members and ministers, Denmark Vesey, had this wonderful, crazy idea that the Constitution actually was correct, that freedom was for all people. Little did he know that there would be such a backlash when he wanted to make sure that freedom was for all people. And so you may know that after the Denmark Vesey incident, Denmark Vesey and others were rounded up. They were in prison and later killed. The pastor of Emmanuel, Morris Brown, whom Morris Brown AME Church is named after, also ended up being sneaked out, almost like the way Reverend Darby snuck out. Don't tell him I said that. And he found his way to Philadelphia. And so as pastor of Mother Emanuel, that was restarted 152 years ago, as the Civil War was coming to an end in Charleston, it is my honor to be here. Today we come to celebrate those soldiers who lived and died and served during the Civil War. There is what many consider an obscure passage of Scripture in the Old Testament about King David. And in 2 Samuel, the 19th chapter, we find that David mourns for his son Absalom. And the Scripture reads, "It was told to Joab, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the troops, for the troops heard that day, the king is grieving for his son. The troops stole into the city that day as soldiers steal in who were ashamed when they flee in battle. The king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice, "Oh, my son, Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" Then Joab, who was the general, came into the house of the king and said, "Today you have covered your face and shamed the faces of all your officers who have saved your life today, and the lives of your sons and your daughters, and the lives of your wives and your concubines, for love of those who hate you, and for hatred of those who love you. You have made it clear today that commanders and officers are nothing to you. For I perceive that if Absalom were alive, all of us would be dead today, and that you would be pleased. So go out at once and tell the troops. Go out at once and speak kindly to your servants. So for I swear that by God, if you do not a man will stay with you this night. And this will be the worse for you than any disaster that has come upon you from your youth until now." Then the king got up and took his seat in the gate. The troops were all told, "See, the king is sitting in the gate." And all the troops came before the king. This comes from 2 Samuel, the 19th chapter, verses 1 through 8. This story is the story of one of mixed emotions from a leader. I'm reminded that this past week is the anniversary also of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And so, though we're here today talking about soldiers, we must also remember the king of the army, the commander-in-chief, the chief general. This story is about David fighting against his son Absalom. His main general and close friend Joab led his troops into the final battle, or what was to be the final battle, of David's army and his son Absalom. And on this day, even though David fought, he fought with mixed emotions because his country was in the midst of a civil war. Father against son, brother against brother, family against family, one generation, one territory against another generation, against another territory. And here, as we are in the winds around Hampton Park, we too today stand in the proverbial arch. We stand in the proverbial gate, remembering a war that also tore apart our country and divided houses, divided regions, divided generations. In this story, King David, yes, was happy that his troops prevailed, but he cried because by winning, it meant that his son, Absalom, lost his life. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard the stories of how the Civil War divided houses. Yes, fought for a good cause, but still divided houses. And when I say divided houses, there were black Confederates and white Confederates. I know, because in the Emmanuel Cemetery we have black Confederates who were buried. There were those from the South and the North who supported the Union and those who did not. And so again, divided houses. On this land, even as an African-American preacher, I respect and understand that yes, Union troops fought, but also Confederate troops fought. And God is not a respecter of persons, though causes. And so we honor all the blood, all the troops that gave their lives during this time. It is in this very obscure text that David sort of encapsulates what many people feel when it comes to the Civil War. Joy and yet pain. The many good men who died for a good cause. Those who died doing what they thought was in the best interest of the country. Yes, as a support of the Union, thank God for the Union. But yes, there were many Confederate soldiers who only fought because they felt that it was good for their homeland. And so, I can imagine like Lincoln, who went to Gettysburg and looked through the fog and saw not just Union soldiers and not just blue uniforms, but also gray uniforms, and wrote those very famous words that we honor, those very, very famous words in his Gettysburg Address that we said is probably one of the best speeches in American history, where he honored all and cherished all's sacrifice and believed and wished that none would have to die for the Union. We may not have had a Gettysburg, but today, as we gather in Charleston on these hallowed grounds, we remember each soldier. Yes, we mourn those in whom have been close to us, but yet we honor them and all sacrifices. And as we're here honoring those Union troops who were buried in a mass grave and later interned with respect, we're reminded of their great joy and their great sacrifice, rather, for all those whom they freed. And so today, like King David, I stand with mixed emotions, with joy, but also as a man of God with sadness, knowing that so many died for the freedom of others. And I pray that as we move forward from this place, and as we move on from one generation to the other, that we never forget those who died in the cause for our nation. And may we sing, as the troop said, his truce is marching on. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Brother Pinckney. I've seen that passage so many times. And as a good Baptist, I'm going to steal that. I'm just telling you. That, brother, is the highest compliment I can pay a man. Could you put... Okay, all right. All right, please be seated. Now, if you'll bear with me, one of our chamber choir members is also a cadet bugler. She ran back to get her bugle so we could hear tap.
So now you got to listen to him for a while.
Brother Pinckney has to be out of here by 4. I'm not going to hold the preacher up. This is, for me, as chaplain for the South Carolina Corps Cadets, a momentous occasion, and I mean that with the greatest sincerity. I am not a Citadel graduate, but I respect our graduates who have served honorably for their cause throughout their history. At the Citadel, we have a long military history. Some of it we really like, and some of it we may not. It's the reality of what Brother Pinckney, of what David said. Gray and blue fought. We want to believe that most of them fought honorably. Those of us who have served in the military know that that's not always the case. But that's what we want to lift up. That's what we want to honor today. Regardless of the uniform, I stand before you, the great-great-grandson of an Irish immigrant who left a land in blight and famine to come to America, and in 1864 joined the cause and served honorably until 1867. God, in His unique sense of humor, led me to a young lady who is the great-great-granddaughter of a Confederate soldier who was wounded in battle in Tennessee. I've always teased that I'd like to believe it was my great-great-grandfather, but no, he was serving at West Point. But that's what's happened. That's who we are. That is the best of who we are. When we come together from a diversity of backgrounds and faiths, a diversity of political affiliations, a diversity of experience, to join together to do what Americans do right and best, and that is to join in common cause for the right to quote or cite that great president: with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us, not let them, let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up a nation's wounds that still sadly from time to time bleed, to care for him who has borne our battles, for his widow and orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish for our children and our children's children a just and lasting peace among ourselves and the nations of the world. I would ask you to please join me in a moment of silence as we each, from our own faith, our own values, vow for a moment to dedicate ourselves this time and this place.
Hi.